Alrighty, welcome along everyone to the Digital Culture Ideas Show and Podcast. The point of this show is that it helps you understand the biggest cultural shift that's happening at the moment, and that's move to a more digital culture. So the reason for this is that technology and the internet are significantly changing the way we think, behave, interact and communicate. So it is a bit of a biggie at the moment. So today I'm super excited because I'm speaking with Peter Bailey, who's a dear colleague of mine and also Managing Director of Aura Information Security. So today we're going to be talking about the digital and security landscape for 2021, as well a bit of a deep dive really into Peter himself and his story and things like that as well. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Thanks, Hilary. Good to be here.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Getting back into things after the holiday. You always sort of come back and then suddenly it seems like you didn't have a break at all. So it's that sort of crazy start to the year, which is good. Good to be busy.
Absolutely. Excellent. Okay, well, as I said, I think it's really useful for our listeners to have a bit of context around who you are and what you do. So it'd be great to get your rundown of how you got into security and a bit about your origin story as well.
Yeah, so a bit of a convoluted path for me getting into security. So I started my career, I'm originally from South Africa, and started my career in Cape Town and actually in advertising. So I originally trained as an advertising copywriter and did a bit of time in traditional media advertising, so print and radio and that sort of stuff. And it was in the late 90s and the internet was a big deal and people were building websites. And a friend of mine was working for a website company and they were looking for someone to create content for their website. So I left traditional media advertising and started doing content for websites, learnt a bit about programming. So I used to do a bit of hard coding, HTML and DHTML in those days. And I remember we managed to get our first GIF banner that actually moved. It was amazing, it was all very exciting in those days. Yeah. And so that was really my introduction to digital and the company that I worked for in Cape Town. I was lucky we had a group of very young and exciting people in the team who were pushing boundaries and trying new ways of using the technology and interacting online. And so that was really my introduction to that world and what that could be like. Very little, I must say, at that stage about security. So we were really just bashing out sites and having as much fun as we could online, but not thinking very much about the security space at all. I spent a few years in the UK traveling around. My wife is a Kiwi and moved back to New Zealand. And that was in 2004 that I moved back to New Zealand. And yeah. And so when I first moved back here, looked for similar work and didn't find it, and so ended up working for a company called Systoc that does systems documentation and training work, and sort of upskilled a lot in the training space there, and very much worked around documenting systems and training people in how to use systems. And so very much the user experience and how people were interacting with systems became part of that conversation. But it was while I was doing that work that I came across a gentleman by the name of Andy Prower. Andy founded Aura, and I worked for Andy for quite some time. He was doing more development work at that stage, and we needed a training tool developed for us, which he did. And I oversaw that project and spent lots of time with him and Mark Keegan, who'd worked with me previously as well. And they were getting into the security thing. They'd built a product for Microsoft, and it needed security tested. They hadn't found anyone local who could do it, and so they saw a gap in the market. And so I spent quite a bit of time up at Andy's house with him, and we would have long conversations about this cybersecurity thing and what it was going to be, and information security, and it was cool, and it was going to be the new thing in the future, and everyone was going to care about it because we were going to become very digital. And it all seemed quite slightly far-fetched at the time, for big companies who needed to look after their security totally, but couldn't really understand how smaller organizations would want to do that. At that stage, it just didn't seem to be such a big issue. And so fast forward a few years, and I was changing jobs, and Andy called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, Aura's doing quite well. We've got a few staff now, and we're really looking for someone to come help us run day to day and work with the business. Would you like to join us?" And so that was in early 2013 that I joined Aura as a general dog's body. Probably I did everything from sales to accounts to billing to working with the team to ensuring people were trained and upskilled, and sort of anything that needed done. I worked on that, which was great. Sort of deep dive into security and getting to really understand the importance of it. And then I think over the last 8 years that I've been with Aura, seeing the landscape change significantly. So in the early days, talking to large government departments and larger corporates and working with them, to now seeing a lot more smaller organizations understand the importance of security and wanting to get on board with that as well. And that entire landscape has changed, and we'll probably talk about it later. But 8 years ago, when I started with Aura, trying to talk to a member of the exec, or never mind the board, about cybersecurity just was never going to happen. It was seen as an IT risk and not something that needed to be talked about at a senior level. And the change we've seen since then to now has been pretty phenomenal, and a really good change to see. Yeah, so that was my story. I kind of stumbled into security by accident, and just found it absolutely fascinating and something I really enjoyed. And so spent a huge amount of time with a very talented team and pestering them with questions for the first few years, so that I could increase my own knowledge, doing a lot of research and spending a lot of time understanding security. And I suppose being immersed in it for 8 years, you pick up quite a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned research. I know that Aura Information Security does a lot of research as well as consulting. Well, I did some research for this interview, Peter. I quite like to internet stalk my people before I have a chat with them. Make sure I'm what they're up to. We're colleagues as well, so I had kind of that lens also. But I was looking on the Aura Information Security website, and obviously you got your bio up there, and what I noticed is in your bio you have this call out to the fact that you're married and you've got young children who keep you very busy, and you don't often see that in bios, but I really liked it. And the reason is because I often kind of call that out myself. I have this big thing about telling people that you're more than one thing. You're not just your job. So for me, it's about being a wife and a mother and security practitioner, and I guess podcast producer, YouTube channel, whatever, all of that stuff all together. But I'm curious, why did you do it in your bio? Like, why was that important to put in there? And then, as a follow-up question, your thoughts on work-family balance. Is that real or illusion?
I should probably talk to my wife about that one as well. I think it is a very important part of your bio. When I meet people and chat to them, I think there's only so much you can find out from the person just talking business. Understanding what makes them tick and what goes on in their lives outside of work is fascinating. You meet people and you talk about their hobbies or the things that they do outside of work, and some of them are unbelievable, and some of them go back to influencing and changing how they think about their work as well. So they will have a hobby that makes them think about work in a particular way. I think for me, family is very important. It's a massive part of my life. My wife's the reason I moved to New Zealand. My kids are often the reason I work as hard as I do, because you want to provide a great future for them, and so that's a big part of who I am is my kids and my family. So it feels strange to leave that out of your bio. If you're just going to talk about what you do for a job, well, that's a portion of who you are. That there's a lot more to it than just your job. And then I think work-life balance, as I'm sure you know, Hilary, is incredibly difficult. I think New Zealand is probably one of the best countries to try and make that happen. New Zealand offers a lot of flexibility around work, certainly working at Aura and Kordia. there's a lot of flexibility around how you use your time and how you work, and I found that in most places I've worked for in New Zealand, whereas in a lot of other countries that's not the case. I think if you really love your job, and I do really love my job, it's very hard sometimes to put it aside, and you do find yourself, as I'm sure you do find, Hilary, you're often away from home for work, so you're spending time away from your family, or you're working late on things, or you, even when you're not working, you're thinking about work stuff and problems you need to solve. So I think it can be hard to get that balance, but I think, again, kind of tying in with your question around why is it in my bio, the reminder of, what's important in your life. Well, your kids and your family are, especially when they're little, and mine are growing up. So my eldest child is 14 now, and my youngest is 8. And so I look at my 14-year-old and they're really becoming an adult and making their own decisions and thinking about what they want to do with their life. And so, yeah, I just think that it's important to understand sort of where people are at, and and what they're doing, and what makes up their life, and spending that time with your kids while they're little is just so important, because before you know it, I know everyone says this, but yep, they're gone and they're grown up and they're doing their own thing, and they don't really want to hang out with you anymore.
I heard someone say once, you only have your kids for 18 years. I'm like, gosh, that's not long enough. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and it sort of feels like that, once they start to plan and decide what they want to do with their lives. And so if you've spent, all your time focused on work and your job and your career, which is important and something, that you should be doing, but you have to find that balance. You have to make sure you're there for your kids. And I think for me, listening to what they say and what my wife says to me, so I know that I'm spending too much time away from home when I say, oh, I'm off to Auckland tomorrow, and the kids go, oh, again, oh, we've hardly seen you for the last few weeks. Then you go, okay, bit too much travel time to cut it back and spend some more time at home. So they're a good sort of barometer, and kind of we encourage them to spark up and say, hey, we're not seeing much of you. What are you up to? Just to keep you grounded.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely listen to that barometer as well.
Yeah.
Peter, we've done this before, this whole kind of webinar online thing. We quite often do security ambassador work for Kordia and Aura, and spokesperson work, and so, which is why this is so lovely to do with you now. But this was something that was kind of new to me, and I've learned a lot over the past year of doing a lot more of this. You've been a great mentor as well, because you've done a lot of this before I joined Kordia. But how did you get comfortable with being online and doing TV and radio and news media? I'm curious how you kind of became confident with that.
Yeah, so quite interesting, and something, probably I was a little bit surprised at how much I found I enjoyed it, to be honest. My background, I've done a lot of public speaking through my life, so I've enjoyed talking to audiences and things like that. While I worked at Sistock and I had a job for a few years at Ministry of Justice as well, I worked a lot in training, so I've delivered a lot of training as well, so used to standing up in front of groups of people and talking about things and trying to pretend you know what you're saying while you're up front. So that was good, and I was used to that. I'd done a bit of radio, and obviously in my early career as a copywriter, had written stuff for radio and worked with production teams and that as well. So I'd had a little bit of exposure to that. To be fair, the first TV interview I did, which was on the AM show a number of years back, I was absolutely terrified. I hadn't done live. I'd done recorded TV in the past. I'd never done live, and certainly not something that was, as popular a show as the AM show. And so I didn't sleep at all the night before, and got on set and sat down. And what I found fascinating was the moment I sat down to start the conversation, that was all it felt like. I was having a conversation with a couple of people who were interested in the topic I was talking about. And so the moment I think I realized that, this is really all it is. You're having a conversation. You got to keep your wits about you a little bit so you don't sound completely ridiculous while you talk. But but it's something, you know, you got to remind yourself of something you know about really well. It's something, you know, you can speak about really knowledgeably, and here's someone who wants to know something you know about. So you're just having a chat with them. And so I think once you get past the hurdle and don't try and think about all the people sitting at home having their breakfast watching on the other side of the screen, it becomes a lot easier. And like I say, I found I've really enjoyed it. So certainly TV and radio stuff that I've done, and online work as well, it's great chatting to people and connecting and finding out, you know, what they want to know and what makes them tick and the things that they're concerned about. And that's what I enjoy, is that engagement and that conversation. And I just try and put the, you know, thousands of people that are listening or watching on the other end to the back burner to feel a bit more confident.
Well, that's a great tip. So thank you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as you're aware, we both lead security teams. So, Kordia, I'm leading the security design operations team, and then you've got the Aura information security team. I'm curious, do you think there's anything different about leading security teams versus other types of teams?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And maybe my experience is a little bit unique as well, because I do lead a security consultancy. So if effectively with the work I've done, you know, both in advertising and with Systock and that, it's all been consultancy work through my career. So you know, 20 years of my life I've spent working in consultancies. And I think consultancy in general, there is a real focus on the people, because your people are your business. Without your people, you don't have a business anymore. And I think there's also with most consultancies I've worked for, and I'm not talking about sort of really big international ones, but there's more of a I'm trying to think of the right term, but like an at-home kind of flavor when you come to work. So, you know, work should feel like a comfortable place to be. So, you know, I look at our office and we've got couches and a pool table, and you know, we've got a chalkboard wall with ridiculous stuff written on it, and you know, have a bit of fun, relax when you come to work. You should enjoy being with your colleagues and working with them. I think though with security, we've got such a tight market that we're working in, for starters, that we really want to make this a place where staff want to be. So having colleagues that they interact with really well and feed off and grow with is incredibly important in this environment. And you know, ensuring that they feel well looked after as well is really important. But I mean, you could say that for most businesses. I do find with the security consultants, though, they are certainly in my team, they're really smart people. I feel quite dumb in some conversations sometimes with a few of them, but they are they're very smart. And they are problem solvers, because that's what we pay them to do, is to look at an issue and figure out, well, how do we resolve this? They also have a very strong sort of moral compass around why you're doing things, and trust and honesty is incredibly important to them as part of the culture. So that's probably the thing I've found the most, you know, when I look at other consultancies I've worked at, is that constant need for transparency and honesty with the team. Building a culture of trust within the business is very important. And if you think about security as a discipline, you know, trust is such an important part of that. And so that's probably the biggest difference I find working with security staff is, you know, create an environment where they feel you're upfront and honest with them, and they're in a trusted environment, value what they have to contribute to the business, and you know, you've got a really dedicated team on your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the expertise thing, and one of the things that I've noticed, particularly with security teams, is that security is not just their job; it's kind of what they live and breathe and work.
Yeah, yeah.
They're working security at work, and then they go home and they're researching security, or you know, playing around with things. It's a very passionate group of people who get involved in security. Which I love.
Perfect word. Yeah, it's passion, right? The teams love what they do. I absolutely love it. You know, I've had people say to me, so, you know, sometimes, I can't believe I get paid to do my hobby. You know, this is just the thing I would do anyway, and now I get to do it, and I get to do it on some really cool systems, and I get some great training, and I work with some awesome colleagues. And so yeah, they love what they do, and that's great. It's great to be around. You know, you have that constant passion sort of bubbling away. It's brilliant.
Absolutely. Okay, so actually I want to take a bit more of a deeper look into security now. So, because I started this show sort of a couple of years ago, and then the podcast only a year ago. Funnily enough, started it during the pandemic. And it's kind of an interesting time for a digital culture sort of show, because you know, so much more has gone digital than ever was. You know, it's part of our lives, it's part of our businesses hugely. And you know, what do you think that means for the importance of security, and how do you think businesses and people have come to grips with that?
Yeah. Look, I mean, it means that cybersecurity is now a massive part of every organization. You know, we're so heavily reliant on technology. And like you say, you know, during lockdown was yet another example of how reliant businesses are becoming on technology, having your staff work remotely. Most of our databases obviously are, you know, technology dependent. A lot of how we interact with our customers is technology dependent. You know, more and more we're seeing agriculture, you know, lots of businesses using technology that wouldn't have in the past. And so as we move more and more into this, the risk from a security perspective just becomes higher and higher. So if you think of I was talking to an organization a while ago who bottled wine, and I said, you know, what would you be worried about from a technology perspective? Thinking, well, probably customer lists and things like that. You know, they don't want their data getting out. And they said, well, actually, our entire bottling plant is automated. So if someone hacked the system that runs our bottling plant and shut it down, we'd be stuffed. So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen? You think about, you know, massive SCADA systems that control, you know, really important systems for organizations that deliver power and things like that, you know, across the country. So from small business to massive infrastructure, technology is through everything now, and it's just going to be more so. You know, I was chatting to my kids the other day, and they were saying, oh, you know, how long do you think it's going to be till we have fully automated vehicles? And you know, Dad, you won't have to drop us to school. We can just get in the car and you can put it at the destination on your phone and send it off, and it'll drop us at school. And I was like, that sounds quite good actually. But but you start thinking about, you know, smart cities and vehicles and medical procedures, and you know, there's just so many things now where organizations are going, technology is the way, and robotics and Internet of Things. And so all of these rely on a degree of security and safety being in place. Now, you know, when the internet was built, like I said, you know, I remember building websites back in the 90s, and we didn't give a stuff about security. And most people, you know, running the internet didn't give a stuff about security then either. And so it hasn't been built as a security-based piece of technology. And so we're constantly, you know, backfilling and changing things to retrofit it to try and make it more secure. You know, hopefully with new technology, you know, companies are thinking about security up front, and we're building things that are secure by design, you know, that they are inherently secure in the way that they're made. But I think for a lot of companies now, particularly in New Zealand, they're starting to realize that this isn't something that they can just leave to the IT manager, or forget about, or pretend isn't happening. You know, we're seeing companies phished and hacked on a regular basis, small businesses, you know, and if they're not prepared for that, and they're not checking that their staff understand what a phishing email looks like, or they haven't backed up their data, you know, suddenly they're at risk. So I think organizations are starting to realize that this is important. I think some of the bigger corporates are well down that path already. I think a lot of smaller companies are going, oh, geez, I need to do something about this. I don't know where to start. And so, you know, that they need a lot of help. But I think it's on everybody's radar, and I think that is just going to be even more so as we move forward. And certainly as we see more and more in the press,
Yes.
attacks going on, and sort of high profile organizations being affected. When we had the Reserve Bank just a few weeks ago, people look at things like that and go, gosh, if NZX, the Reserve Bank, or these sorts of organizations are getting attacked, well, what does that mean for me as a business? And and what does that mean for me if I'm an exec or a board member? What are my responsibilities here?
Absolutely. Someone said to me recently, if you're looking for a career with some stability, which can be quite hard to find, then cybersecurity is probably not a good one for now. So,
yes.
And I think that's quite true. And actually, I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the current landscape, because the Aura and Kordia market survey results have come out. So this is an annual survey which the company runs. Can you maybe just explain for the viewers who are listening what that's about, and then also what some of the results were, because they're quite surprising, I thought.
Yeah. So we do an annual survey. It's very much on the New Zealand market. We go to decision makers within organisations to ask them about cybersecurity and some of the topics of the day. So some of the questions we asked consistently over the last few years to see where organisations are at, like their spend on cybersecurity, or do they train staff, or how well informed are they, that kind of thing. And some of them are topical for that particular year. So I think like over the last couple of years, we asked about the upcoming Privacy Act changes, and were organisations ready for that. The reason we do it is, there's not a heck of a lot out there that gives us a good snapshot of the New Zealand market. There's a lot of international studies, and we can look at the States and we can look at Europe. But, New Zealand is a little microcosm here, and we do tend to react a little bit differently to some countries, and we are small. So it's interesting to find out, well, what's trending here. And we get some of that data through organizations like CERT on reported information. But some of the wider stuff that we go after from businesses, where we can understand, well, what are you thinking and where are you spending your time and money, is really interesting. So I think the survey this year was interesting. I mean, interesting anyway in 2020, given what was going on. I think organizations were trying to figure out, what was happening and how they reacted. The biggest surprise for me in the survey, to be honest, there's a lot of stuff in there where you look at the answers and you go, well, that's kind of, where I thought things were trending. We're seeing an increase in spend, maybe not quite as much as there should be, and we're seeing organizations think about the changes to legislation. I mean, I thought that was interesting that there was still, towards the end of last year, we still only had 50% of New Zealand organisations seem to know that the act was going to change on the 1st of December. So that kind of stuff, a little bit concerning, but not surprising. I think the one that surprised me was around staff education and training. So we asked a question around, how are you training and preparing your staff, or are you running training programs? And that's declined over the years that we've been running the survey. Now, given as well as I do, Hilary, that in New Zealand, the stats around phishing emails and staff being your front line, who can really essentially save your business from an attack, is just so important. And for organizations to be, it looks like from the stats that we could see, they're really focusing on investment in technology, which is great and absolutely should be happening. So in automated systems that are going to track, when things are going wrong with your business, but then are removing that money from training their staff. So your automated systems are going to pick up part of it. Your staff are really at that front line and can be that block to stop these things getting into your business. So I was very surprised at that trend, and I think it's a bit concerning, given it's the biggest problem for New Zealand is phishing and scams, and we really need to be spending time and money for organisations to bring their staff up to speed. They need to know what this looks like, and they need to know how to combat it. So that was probably the biggest surprise for me in the survey, where I was quite shocked at that trend.
Yeah, and even with phishing, like that's evolving. So there's obviously email phishers, but then we're seeing a lot more text phishers, like text spam, and then also phone calls is the other one, where the parent IT department rings up and asks you to make a change to your computer and it's not actually your IT department.
Yeah.
So I think it's so important to train people in those
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah, and you kind of think it's been around for a while, so you think, oh, people would know. Mobile's probably the one that's catching people out the most now because it feels very personal. You know, you get something to your phone, you're used to clicking links. People don't think about security issues, but certainly phishing emails and phone scams, you'd like to think people would be familiar with. But I've run a bit of training still that I deliver myself for customers, and still have conversations with staff members who find it hard to identify or don't know that people do things like that. Oh, you know, what do you mean someone's going to ring me up and pretend they're not who they are? That's crazy. That doesn't really happen, does it?
Yeah, exactly. Now we do have another session, another Kordia session coming up on this. This is the Kordia Talking Tech session. So yourself and me, but also Kirsten Patterson, who's the CEO of the Institute of Directors over in here in New Zealand, are going to really thrash some of these results about and talk about them a lot more. So if anyone is interested in registering for that, it's on February the 24th. And if you just Google Kordia Talking Tech, then you'll find the registration page there. So people can have a look at that if they're keen to dig into those survey results a little bit more. There's a lot there.
Should be a good session. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, Peter. So what's coming up next for you, and what are you focusing on in the next 12 months?
Yeah. So the next 12 months for us, really, you know, like I said, we're coming out of 2020. It's been a bit of a crazy year, sort of everyone in lockdown and that. It's been a massive boost year for security, to be fair. A lot of organizations have started to look at their security. So I think really 2021 is a bit of a consolidation of that, and that's really what we're looking at. So what are organizations doing with the information they've got? Do they understand their risk profile? I think is the biggest thing we want to know. Do you actually understand what level of risk you're at? And then what are you going to do about it? And so working with companies to understand their risk and to resolve that, I think is a big deal for us. I think there's more of a focus on cloud than there's ever been before. So we're seeing so many organizations migrate to cloud.
Yes.
And I think, again, Hilary, something you and I have chatted about before, you know, organizations have this idea that moving to cloud instantly absolves them of all security issues and they're good to go. So I think working with organizations that they understand that while cloud is possibly more secure than hosting your own servers, it's not the answer for everything. And there are risks native to making that move to cloud that organizations don't acknowledge. And so I think that that's going to be a big topic for the upcoming year is how do we do that. And the other one, you know, I mentioned NZX before, and that was a really interesting experience for us in the industry. So DDoS is something we all know about. You know, it's been around for ages. Were we considering it as a major threat for 2020? Not really, not in New Zealand. You know, it was just one of those things that ticks along in the background. And so after the NZX attack, I gave a few talks, and you know, suddenly DDoS was in my slide deck, and I would say to people, you know, when I created the draft for these slide decks at the start of the year, DDoS was definitely not part of this discussion, and now it is. And so what we had a lot of people saying to us was, well, how do I protect for DDoS? Like, I just want to fix my DDoS thing now. And the more we had these conversations, the more we realized that, you know, people running organizations didn't understand that you need to protect for everything, and not in that you need to understand what every attack is going to look like and how to protect against that, because that's not possible. But you need to be thinking about your overall security posture. So who are you as a business? What's your risk? What are the potential threats to you? And then what are you doing about it? And are you making conscious decisions around what the threat is and how you're going to react to that? So if you do suffer a DDoS attack, or whatever the next thing is that hackers decide is going to make them a lot of money, how do you ensure that you're going to be able to recover from that as quickly as possible? You know, you're not always going to be able to walk away from one of these squeaky clean. You know, you could well end up being affected by an attack, but it's how quickly you can respond and recover that is going to really show the organizations that can win. So I think, you know, working with organizations to say, yep, DDoS, you definitely want to make sure you're okay there, but actually you want to think about your security posture across the board and make sure that you're in a position where if something goes wrong, you're going to be able to recover from that quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, because they say that the bomber will get through. It's not if it happens, it's when it happens.
It is when, yeah, unfortunately.
There will be adversaries out there who can cut through.
Yeah, and we don't know where the attacks, what form they're going to take. Like I say, DDoS as ransomware wasn't, really something we'd thought too much about. We knew hackers love ransomware and love holding companies to ransom, and we knew DDoS was out there as a tool, but we hadn't sort of put the two together, and they did. So what's next? Who knows? A new bit of tech that they've created or something else that they bundle together that works. I always remind people at the end of the day, hackers are trying to make as much money as they can for as little effort as possible. And so they're going to go for the low-hanging fruit. And if you're not looking after yourself, then yep, you will get attacked.
That's right. Oh, Peter, look, a huge thanks for coming on the show today. It's been really fun to chat to you,
Yeah.
and of course, I love talking with you about all things security. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks, Hilary. And really good chat. As you can hear, I can probably talk for hours about this, but I'm sure everyone's got other things to do.
If they do want to catch more of Peter and myself, then do Google Kordia Talking Tech. We do have that State of the Cyber Nation coming up where we go through those results in depth. All right, Peter, we'll sign off here. So good speaking with you. Take care.
Yeah, good to see you. Cheers.